All right, guys, change plans. So basically, the wiring harness from the other truck or the other 300 just isn't going to work. It's way too big. It's way too full of things that I don't need. So I contacted Sound German Automotive. Great guys, super easy to talk to. Helped me out over the phone. Set me up with a package. So basically, they sent me out the 392 Mopar crate engine wiring harness, which comes with all these things. So it's basically the interior, small interior harness, the engine harness, and the fuse box. Nice and tight. Instructions, new pedal, a couple of sensors, O2 sensors, and then the PCM is in the box, safely tucked away. And then they send out their Nag 1 transmission control, which basically gives me a bunch of wiring diagrams that I have no idea what I'm looking at yet. And then they send you out another wiring harness that has all of the stuff to control the transmission. I also got them to allow me to use the original gauges and the original steering wheel. So I'm able to run the original gauge cluster and the original paddle shifter on the steering. I already have a shifter, so I didn't need to get that from them. And I already have the transmission controller, so that goes with the thing, but they can also provide that if you need it or you send one out to them. But yeah, so now I'm basically gonna take this pile of wires and start putting it on the truck. So I need to start disassembling the current engine wiring harness and get it ready to be removed. So I can put the new one on before I jump the cab, because I figure it'll be a little bit easier before the cab goes on to unplug everything. Yeah, so here we go. Video update, progress on the wiring. The Mopar crate harness is mostly on and plugged in and done. The plug doesn't work with my throttle body. It's got that style plug, and the throttle body has the older style. So I'm just gonna swap it to a newer throttle body. It's a couple $100 on Rock Auto. So I'm just gonna swap it out and then my plug will work. They have plug adapters to go from the older harness to a newer throttle body, but not the other way around. So have to swap it out, not a big deal. The other problem I ran into was my alternator plug doesn't fit on the 06 alternator that I was using to get my clearance. So I have to do a bit of research to find an alternator that's gonna work with this setup, because I need the clearance in order to get past the frame. The old one just doesn't fit. If worse comes to worse, I know Holly sells a mount, but it moves the alternator like up into this section, which would be completely outside my hood. So I think that's gonna look ridiculous. So ideally I keep it tucked in there, which is just barely under the hood. The Mopar crate harness is really straightforward to plug in and use. No big issues with it so far, except for maybe the wrong year motor. So I had a few adapter problems, but easily solved with a few extra parts. This is all that's basically left to be plugged in. So computer, body harness, power, ground. So that's basically done and ready for the cab to go back on. Started to install the tone ring, which goes on the back of the flange. So you have to get the flange off, which is a 30mm 12-point deep socket. Just use your impact and wheel it off. And that's 147 foot-pounds of torque to put it back on. And then you pin it over and away you go. And put the little bracket on. Some quick zip ties to hold the wire. So that plugs into the transmission harness, standalone harness. So does that. So that's everything that lives outside of the cab. So basically I'm at the point now where I need to get the cab put back on to continue the wiring. So at that point, I'm gonna figure out where I'm actually gonna mount my computers and stuff, which I'm hoping can live inside the cab, although they're designed to live outside the cab for the Mopar crate stuff, but I don't think I have the room on the firewall. So we're gonna find that out once I get this cab back on, which should be the next day or so when I get time. Yeah, so the wiring is making progress. Waiting on parts and got to move a few things around. All right, let you know when there's more. Okay guys, back in the shop. Last night, the wife and I managed to get the cab back on the truck. That was an absolute shit show. The hoist doesn't quite get it high enough, and the jack didn't help that much. So it ended up just being an absolute nightmare to get on there, but it's back on the frame. Let me show you why it was a bit of a nightmare and why I think it ended up that way, and maybe talk about some of the plans for the wiring now that it's back on. Okay, the biggest reason it was a nightmare is this front section is now touching the frame along here. So the cab didn't want to slide down. You can see it on this side as well. And I wasn't doing that before. I think what happened was all the welding that I did to the bottom of the cab basically pulled those panels in. So I'm gonna have to hit it with a grinder and get myself some clearance here so that the cab isn't rubbing on the frame. But now that it's in, I can basically bolt it down and away I go. My throttle body showed up, so I swapped that over and it has the right connection now. The knock sensors showed up, so those are installed. I started to look at putting in the rest of the wiring harness. So I'm just trying to plan out where everything's gonna go. I've seen this done on a different guy's truck where he mounted the power distribution up here, which is a nice safe spot for it. So I think that's gonna happen. And then you can run the wires out through here that have to connect. For the computer, I think I have space to put it here, but it basically eats up any remaining space I have in my firewall, which I need to put my fuel regulator on. So I'm thinking, which might even be safer, is to pull this actually inside the cab and just pull the whole computer in here and mount it on the inside. That way it's all tucked away. So I ordered a split grommet in order to put a big enough hole in here, and then I'm gonna put my fuel regulator here. So that's gonna happen in the next day or so, hopefully. I got a new alternator coming with the proper connection. Instead of mucking around and flipping the connections and hoping that it just works, I'm just gonna spend the money and make sure it works. So plan now is to kind of get some of those major components mounted for the wiring so that I have a good understanding of where they're gonna go. And then I'm gonna get back in here, clean up this mess obviously, and I'm going to finish the floor in here. So I'll seam seal it all, give it a coat of paint, and then I'm gonna move on to the dash and get that cleaned up enough that I can reinstall the components. Nothing fancy, just get them remounted because they were mounted before. And I should be getting close to being able to start this thing. I think the biggest thing after that is gonna be finish the fuel lines, which I have 2 fittings missing. I just wanted to finalize my fuel regulator. So I'll finalize that and get those fittings on, and then I gotta do something for the radiator. Okay guys, a couple days later, been out in the shop. Got the harness through the firewall. Had to do a little disassembly on the big PCU connector, or no, ECU connector, in order to get it to fit through. So it's all in and mounted and plugged in. So I'm just waiting on the grommet that will kind of fill that giant hole. For now. I picked up one of these single post battery things, and that's going to get mounted down there on the body. So I can connect the battery and the power to the engine harness. So that'll get done probably in the next day or so. The biggest thing I've been working on is getting the transmission harness. Had a little bit of paralysis, I guess, waiting or trying to figure out how to do this and what was the best way. I really didn't want to crowd up the footwell because the footwells on the truck are really small. So this is the other side of the body harness from the Mopar. So that's got to be tucked up inside, but this is all the transmission harness stuff. So I ended up mounting these two, the transmission controller and the module from them at the back here onto the floor. So I'm just going to put some rubber grommets underneath her, rubber washers, to help isolate them so they don't get too shooken up. Burying most of the wiring underneath the seat. So I'm going to try to bundle this up and kind of stick these down where I can. That makes sense. These are some fuses that go to the ignition and stuff. So those are going to just get buttoned up with some self-tappers. I cut a hole out to the transmission. So I got a grommet coming for that. So that's where the lines come in from the tone ring and the side of the transmission. And then this stuff here, I started bundling up. This stuff is all got to get up underneath the dash. So I'm basically gonna run it up here, nice and neat with some zip ties up underneath. So I'm gonna get some better loom and I'm gonna loom all that together and then zip tie it so it's nice and firm and it's out of the footwell. So the shifter's plugged in. I got my ignition switch and start button semi-mounted where I want it. I threw the gauges back in just to plug them in. I'll smack my head off the roof because, you know, not looking. So that's all plugged in. So I basically got to clean up the Mopar side and kind of bundle this up a little bit nicer so it can live there forever. But I think the plan now is I'm going to pull all this out one more time and I'm going to seam seal and paint the bottom of the cab so that this is done and I can basically reinstall this final instead of zip tying stuff and then cutting it out later again. So I got to basically spend some time, take it out again one more time and then install it kind of more final. So the other thing I did pick up was these zip tie tabs that bolt in from TMR Customs. They're like an off-road company, but I bought a bunch of stuff for the 4-link suspension from them. It's really good quality, so I ended up buying these, and these things work really, really handy. Oh geez, I'm knocking stuff everywhere. So these work really handy to kind of just take your wiring and set it in. I'll zip tie it, and this is going to get zip tied at the back. And then I got them installed along the side of the transmission tunnel here, so that will hold all that. And I used them underneath the truck to hold up the wiring and get that all cleaned up. So getting close on the wiring, but like I said, I'm gonna rip it out and get it to the point where I can final install it. So spend some time cleaning up the bottom of the cab. So that'll be probably a day of messing around, getting the stuff to dry and wait and then paint. So that's the next step, and then probably dink around and install the rest of the stuff under the firewall. Painted up the floor a bit. All of the floor got primer, self-etching primer, and then I painted the parts that aren't going to get sound deadening with the black steel. So the riser for the seat, the tunnel, is all gonna stay not with sound deadening for now. Picked up some of this stuff off Amazon, Noicove or something. Comes in a box. It's, I don't know, sticks to the floor and you roll it out. Basically it's sound deadening. They have an insulated one as well, but started to cut that, so that's basically gonna go on all the flat floors under the seats. And then I think I might run it up the back of the truck as well. But yeah, just banging through this so that I can get back to the wiring. What did I manage to get done over the weekend? I guess it's more than the weekend. It's probably been close to a week since I filmed anything. So big things I did. I got the fuel system all plumbed in. It's all connected, so I got all the AN hose lines built and fitted. Had most of it done. I just had to kind of mount the fuel regulator and get all of it plumbed all the way to the back. So it's all plumbed in. I got a couple more P-clips to attach, but that's all done. What else did I get done? I moved where I was going to connect the battery to the engine harness. I put it up high. Figured high and dry was better than low and wet with power. So initially I was going to mount it way down in there. Then I decided to pull it up here. So that's better. I got the 2-piece grommet on for the main wiring harness going into the cab. I got the engine block ground and I got the cab ground. I got the cab bolted down. So I got 4 bolts in with the body washers. Not happy with the hex bolts, but can't seem to locate any carriage bolts that are that size. So I may just live with those, but I also may just keep hunting around until I find some. I got most of the wiring harness back in after I put the sound deadening on. So that's the original transmission controller. That's the Sound German Automotive controller that they provide you. This is most of their harness. I did have to extend one of the wire that goes to the star connector because this is all supposed to be mounted up under here, but there's just no way all this is going under there. This is a small cab, so I figured back here I'm going to build something over here to give you a little bit of storage behind the seat, like over there. So this is all going to be tucked in, zip tied underneath. I re-loomed some of it so it has one loom going up to the rest of it. I got my ground bar put in. I had to put some seam sealer around that grommet because it just wasn't great. So I just mashed it around because who cares, no one's going to see it under there. I got to remount the computer. I got the ignition all wired up. The shifter's in and plugged in. I just need to do the linkage. Yeah, so we're going to get the gauges put back in. Get some other stuff going here, but making some good progress. I'm thinking in the next day or so I might be able to throw a battery on it and just see if the engine rolls over. It won't start because I have no gas and I haven't bothered to do the fuel pump yet, but I figured it'll be a good indication of whether or not I'm going to let the smoke out of the system or if it's going to actually start to work. So little by little, I'm getting it. The one big thing I do have to get is the Sound German Automotive guys are providing me with a wiring diagram to rewire their harness to work with the original brake sensor on the truck. So apparently I can use some of the wires that are already in the harness and just kind of shift them around. So I'm waiting for that to come so that I can wire up the brakes to this thing, and then that should all work. So waiting for that. I'm gonna tidy this up and zip tie it up as best I can. In the meantime, re-loom some of this stuff so that it's nice and tidy. I'll probably drop the seat in, make sure all this doesn't get in any interference, and hopefully throw a battery on this thing and see if it blows up or not. Yeah. Okay guys, back in the shop, another wickedly awesome day out. Nice sunshine on the weekend. So here I am, I pretty much buttoned up the wiring for now. So I cleaned this up the best I could and zip tied it all in nice. I gotta cut a few zip ties off, but as we all know, cutting them off leaves sharp edges. So I'm gonna do that for later or get the proper tool so that they don't get sharp. Yeah, so I ended up wiring in the brake and repinning the transmission control module from German Sound Automotive, like they asked. When I was messing with the brakes, the sensor smashed in half, so it must have been old plastic, so I have to order a new one, which is fine. Under here is still a little bit of a rat's nest, but it's not too bad. I'm gonna zip tie a few things together and bundle up a few more wires, but I have to still integrate the rest of the wiring at some point. So I think today I'm gonna drop the seat back in here so I can make sure that none of this interferes with the seat. Thinking this might need another zip tie or brace to make sure that it stays out of the way, but we'll see once I get the seat in. The battery box is in and painted, so the box is actually going to come across here, so this will be hidden. I got my ground in. My power cable is from the original donor vehicle, which is way too long right now, so I'm just looking for the parts to kind of cut that down properly. But and I wired in the fuel pump, so that all is working. So yeah, that's the progress I've made. Yeah, so I'm gonna tinker around with a few more little things, and then I'm gonna probably plug this thing in and see what happens. Later, I just double checked all my grounds and all my power. The only thing I don't have plugged in right now is there's a relay underneath that deals with the brake switch, so I can get it into gear, but that's not important right now. So going to see what happens. Well, full disclosure, I know what's going to happen. I've plugged this in because I wasn't filming at the time. I had the fire extinguisher out just in case it started to smoke. But basically, okay, so power on, just not bolted in obviously, ground on. So this is my ignition switch, and everything comes to life. So the gauges still work, which is a good thing considering I hacked them all up. The fuel pump kicks on. I heard some relays kick on in the Mopar harness, and if I give her a little, she wants to start, so that's a good thing. So now it's just to get the headers on, and basically I should be ready to fire it, put some fuel in it, but I gotta get the headers done first. Okay, seat's back in. I'm gonna conclude this video, I think. Basically the wiring is buttoned up to the point where it's good for now. It's obviously not final. It doesn't have the harness to do all the lights and everything in it, but it's good enough to get the engine started, I believe. So the wiring all clears the seat. It's all tucked away and hidden nice. I want to thank the Sound German Automotive guys for putting up with all my dumb questions so far, because I've asked a few dumb ones, but I guess there is no bad question. So as you're learning, so I'm figuring this out as I go. I think I'll show you guys what I'm going to work on next quickly before the video ends. For those who have made it this far in the video, I appreciate it. And yeah, so I'll tell you what's coming next. Okay, next things, there's going to be the radiator. I purchased a radiator, but it's not going to work. It's too wide. Initially, I thought maybe I could section the grill shell to fit it, but I decided at the end that that's going to be way too much work, and I'm not sure how that's actually going to turn out. So I think I'm going to order a different radiator and save this one for a future project. The 32 Highboy Ford radiators look like they will fit inside of this grill shell. So I'll have to make a custom mount, and then that will work. And the other big thing before I do the headers is I need to fix my steering. So here's my handy dandy mock-up tool. Basically, the existing steering that I'd already done just didn't come out in the right spot. So it was trying to come out basically like that. And that would basically put it coming out somewhere around here, which goes directly into the back of the motor. I thought I could do a joint down and across, but I think that's going to be weaker. So I'm going to scrap using the original. Unfortunately, the wiring is set up to use the original steering, but that's an easy disconnect, so that's not a big deal. So the plan is to take this and get it down. The vice grips are in the way now. Basically get it down into the floorboard and come out the bottom there, which will give me a straight shot down to my steering. So I ordered a new setup through Flaming River that should be here in the next couple days. So that'll be the next thing I work on before I send it out to get the custom headers made, because I can't find a stock pair of headers or anything that's going to fit this. So I'm going to end up getting a custom pair done that'll show you the end results of that. But yep, keep going.